Hey guys, it's Jason from Schroeder Guitars. I'm going to give you a brief little introduction to how I do the binding on guitars. So I have this, this is a rough carved redwood top chopper, and I'm going to be doing some snakewood binding around it with purfling. I'm going to have 2 layers of purfling. It'll have maple and then an ebony strip in between. So first thing I've done after I rough carve the top is actually cut it over on my overarm router or pin router, and if you look closely you can see, let me see, the other side might be easier to see, but there's actually a little step here where the binding will sit. The purfling will sit on that step, and then the binding, actual binding, the snakewood, will sit on this outside step. So nice and clean cut, making sure that there's no stepping in terms of, this should all be basically the same plane, no divots or anything like that. So here are my binding strips that I actually bent this one yesterday. This is the tightest bend. There'll be a joint right here, but this is the lower horn, and so this other little piece here, I haven't done the joint yet, but it's going to basically sit something like that, and then this piece, the last couple inches here, will get trimmed off, and then that'll be a nice tight joint. And these thinner strips are my purfling, and so it'll go snakewood and then maple and then ebony for a nice clean line. And my good friend James Russell taught me that to put a nice thin black line between your top and the lighter maple, and this black line makes it, all the binding and the purfling, look really nice and crisp. It's one extra step and a little more material, and one more thing to keep track of as you're laying in the binding and gluing, and it can be a little bit you know, it's kind of a stressful, hectic time when you have glue drying and trying to tape the binding all into place and everything, but when it's done, it's really nice, especially if you do any kind of sunburst on the finish of the guitar. You have this black line to scrape to, instead of trying to get exactly right on the light color, so there's a little bit of a fudge factor too, but it just looks really, really nice to have that black, real defined line. So thank you, Mr. Russell. So this will actually sit on the guitar. You can see this is how it's going to look, and you can see where I'm going to cut it and make a joint right there. So it's all kind of pre-bent. It's not exactly perfect. There are a little bit of gaps that will close, but it's all pre-bent using my you can see in the distance here. So this is my iron. It's turned off at the moment, but this is how I made the bends in this piece here, and bring it up a little bit closer. So this is my side bending iron. You can adjust the temperature here, and then it's got a different shape. You can see it's sort of a odd shape, so I can make a tighter bends on this side, and then large bends here, and then kind of in between bends around this radius. So when I'm doing the really tight ones, it's going around here, and so then I overbend after I made that curve, and then around here. So that's kind of how it will look. So I'll get back with you in just a little bit after I start taping and gluing, getting the binding and the purfling all in place. Show you how it finishes up. So here's kind of the finished look. I'm just holding this in place right now, but you can see the thicker snakewood on the very outside, a thin stripe of the white maple, and then the black, and then the redwood. So it's going to look really nice when it's all done. Okay, got this hot now, so I'm going to try not to touch my face on it, but I've got this piece that's going to go around the body, and I'm going to increase the curve here just a little bit, so I'm making the radius smaller, and make it fit the body a little better before I start taping it and gluing it. So I'm going to get a little bit wet. I've got a toothbrush here which works well to apply this, and just a little jar of water. There you go. And then I'm not saturating it or soaking it, I'm just applying it directly on here, and as it dries out I'm reapplying. Sometimes it's so hot that it won't even stay wet, it'll just keep drying it up because it gets really warm. So if you try to bend it too cold, it'll break, and if you try to bend it too hot, it'll burn and scorch, which is harder to do with this type of wood, but you just got to be a little bit careful, and there's sort of just the right pressure and amount of time that you want to let this thing sit on the heating iron. And so I don't know if you can hear that sizzling, but the water is kind of sizzling, and it's actually drying up a little bit as I move it along. You can also kind of feel it kind of rubberize as it gets warm. Plasticize, maybe, is the proper term. And my basic rule is don't push it any harder than it wants to be pushed. It's kind of like people. So if you sense that it's too difficult to push, let it heat up a little bit more and let it sit there a little bit longer. And if it gets too dry, you want to get a little bit wet. Get a little more water on it. So here's just sitting there. It looks like it's a lot better. So now I'm going to trim it at there's going to be a joint right at the very center line at the butt of the guitar. And I'll trim it and get it close, and then leave them both a little bit long, and then I'll trim them down. I'll start at this end and bring them both back, and then they'll both meet. Actually, all 3 pieces on this side, 3 pieces on this side will all line up right there at the center line. So just about ready to start tacking and gluing and taping. So yeah, I'll check in with you after I'm done. Here's the other side of the binding. It's pretty close. And that'll need to get trimmed a little bit here too. You can see where the joint is there, so that'll come up there. And then this other piece will butt up right against it, right there. But I'm pretty happy with that. I can tape everything into place there. Everything's got a little bit of give, so I can pull it tight in there after I'll have to perf things in. I just thought this was interesting as I'm working here on this guitar. Redwood chopper with carina back and snakewood binding. And I looked up here. Oh, my phone's ringing. Anyway, there's my boy Neil Haywood with his. And that's the original monk chopper with the same spec. So here's my first step in putting the binding on. You can see I've got a little clamp system going on here to get that tight into that little curve there. And this is going to start it all, so it'll all be nice and tight. It's tight tight against the bottom here also. So there's no gap between the snakewood and the carina. And then it's also tight, all tight against each other too. So I'll start that there and then continue my way around the body. Right now this is all loose.